Hi, and welcome to the podcast. Todd Milewski here with Nicole Haase from USCHO.com. And Nicole, we are fully into the playoffs and we are fully into playoff upsets with maybe more to come, question mark, this week as we get into conference championship week, which is really a week because we've got games Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, and all 5 championship games on Saturday, which is a cool way of kind of spreading this out over a longer period of time. But I want to get into the first off, a couple of the upsets that we saw over the weekend. There were some game upsets, but two upset advancing teams out of last weekend's games. And the first one I want to get to is Minnesota State defeating Minnesota Duluth in 3 games in the WCHA, that being the 4-5 series, which always tends to give us the best matchup, I guess. It was a come from behind series victory too for the Mavericks. Lost 2-0 in the first game, won in double overtime, 2-1 in the second game, and then 2-1 again in game 3. And we were kind of going back and forth on a text chain and saying that, 4 goals is no way to win a series if you're Minnesota Duluth, but 4 goals was exactly what Minnesota State got to win a series too. So it really just did feel like whoever was going to find the last bounce in that series was going to advance, and Mankato is the one that did it.
Yeah, forgive me for mixing my sports, but good Lord, does Ev Gascon need some run support?
Mm-hmm.
She's gonna be the goalie of the year, in my opinion. Like, she's the front runner. She's had just another outstanding season. Plenty would argue she should have been last year, and she's just not getting the offense from her team. And I mean, we continue to say this. There's kind of no excuse for Minnesota Duluth. There's plenty of offensive power on that team, and yet they just can't seem to make things connect. It's almost frustrating or like painful to watch as a fan, where you're just like, what's happening? Why did you make that decision? Why did that pass go? But I thought, Minnesota State sort of read the writing on the wall, played it really well, played great defense, did very good on the forecheck. They put a lot of pressure on UMD coming out of the back, and didn't necessarily score immediately off a turnover, but like caused enough chaos and eventually would like end up with the puck and hold the zone. So that to me was interesting, just in that it wasn't like turnover, a turn and shoot. And I also just overall, I think we'll come back this a few times this weekend, talking about this past weekend. Puck possession, face-offs just were such a huge part of why some of these teams were able to do what they were able to do. But yeah, I thought Mankato played a spectacular game. As much as we talk about Evgescon, Haley Hansen was outstanding in net for Mankato. Made like 140 saves or something on 144 shots. Just absolutely played out of her mind. I just, yeah, all the things came together for Mankato. It was a great series. I didn't have any rooting interest, but we all know I love an underdog, and chaos. So in that case, I was rooting for Minnesota State on Sunday, just because good for them. Just wasn't what anybody would have expected to come out of that series. I think Minnesota Duluth, you've been playing with some of the predictors. Minnesota Duluth really put themselves in a tough position, looking for an NCAA at large bid, especially because everybody that they're sort of competing with that are still playing, and they have to sit around and wait and watch the MPI and hope. So huge weekend from Mankato. We just looked up, it was the last time lower seed went to the final face-off since 2018.
Correct. That was Bemidji State beating Duluth that year in 3 games. 2018, the last time a bottom 4 seed won a series in the WCHA. It's so you mentioned Haley Hansen. I did some quick math here in my head. I think 139 saves on 143 shots is a heck of a weekend. And it's you never know how far you can go with a hot goalie in the playoffs, right? And that's absolutely one of the key components to any team that wants to make a run is to have that. Whitney Tuttle scored both those goals in Saturday's game too, including the double overtime goal in that one. It just felt like kind of paying attention to that while I was watching other games too, like the Mavericks were just kind of holding on, and then found their chance. And that's the opportunistic nature that I think they're going to have to carry through. Again, they're going to have to play Wisconsin in the semifinals of the WCHA final faceoff, which we'll talk about in a little while. But that's really their chance. Goaltending, opportunistic offense.
Patience and the commitment to sort of holding on to their plan, playing how they wanted. I said this to you off camera, but it just really reminded me of like how Switzerland played their way to a bronze medal in the Olympics this year. I thought it was very similar, which was, stick to what you're trying to do, ride your hot goalie, and like you said, be opportunistic. And I thought even in the same from some of that forecheck and putting pressure on and forcing turnovers, they didn't try to be a team they aren't. They didn't try to sort of offensively put 300 shots towards somewhere near the net and hope. They were just really smart with the puck and patient and took their chances and their opportunities. And that game winner in double overtime from Whitney Tuttle was a wraparound that she just snuck at the post. I mean, when you're facing a goalie like Gascon, no offense to Haley Hansen, but like this was a huge weekend for her. Gascon, this is what she does, right? Like she's just really a difficult goalie to beat. And so they didn't try to pretend that they're, that they're Abby Murphy or KK Harvey, right? Like they found the small holes that were there and just really, I think it was just really smart, really patient, like you said, really opportunistic play.
The other upset game in the WCHA was St. Cloud State winning game 1 of its series at Minnesota, which was, we were talking about this kind of surprisingly, it's only the second time the Huskies have ever won at Ritter Arena. I believe the last one was just last year, the other or one of the recent years, and it was just like amazing that a team has played so many times in an arena and never won until just recently, and getting a big playoff win with Grace Wolf scoring right off a face-off. Amelia Carrico, 42 saves for the shutout in that one. The Gophers came back with a 4-1 win on Saturday behind 2 goals from Abby Murphy, and then kind of ran away with a 6-1 win on Sunday. Bella Finale and Josephine Bouveng scoring 2 goals each in that one. So the Gophers advanced, but there's a little bit of cracks there, you would think, and especially with the players that are coming back from the Olympics and trying to get them some rest, having to play that third game when the semifinal is on Thursday, it kind of really shortens that week and it shortens that preparation and the rest that the Gophers can get before they're going to have to go and play Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, at least they have the bonus of playing in town, I guess. The travel they don't have to worry about. But yeah, what was great about that St. Cloud win is that it too was not stolen. Like they controlled that game. That was the game they wanted to play, and at no point was Minnesota able to sort of break through that or force their hand or sort of wrest control back of the game. And that what I thought was so impressive about it was the way that St. Cloud went in with their plan. And kudos to Minnesota for adjusting for in games 2 and 3. Like obviously they made didn't allow that to happen to them again, and I think that's a huge one. We should too, sort of unrelated, but the Abby Murphy's goals in that second game. She's now the Minnesota career goals leader with 141 because the first one broke it, I think. She had been tied since prior to the Olympics with Nadine Muzerall for most goals in a Gopher program career, and she broke through in that second game. So kudos to her. I think we'll probably have some fun sound bites and stuff about that this weekend at the WCHA tournament. But some of those old records, the game was so different. Like I just don't know that they'll ever be touched. And Abby obviously needed the extra year to do this. But yeah, we'll have the little asterisk on the extra games played. But of course, just an absolutely phenomenal number of goals. I mean, she's essentially like a goal per game in her career, which is nuts.
Yes. Also in the WCHA, Ohio State swept St. Thomas and Wisconsin swept Bemidji State, but the Badgers needed overtime in game 2 in a little Edwards goal in that game 2 to sweep that series. So we move on to, before we move on, I do want to mention you had talked about a predictor. USCHO.com does have an NPI predictor. You can get to it through the quick links on the women's homepage. We'll also put it in the show notes here, a link to that. It's fun just to, try and change around some matchups and see what comes out in terms of who makes the tournament and who doesn't. The Duluth people might want to pay attention to a lot of those. We'll talk a little bit more later in the show about some of those scenarios and how things get a little bit weird there potentially for Duluth. But if you have some time and want to check out how that works, make sure to hit that link up. The other upset was in Hockey East, where the number 6 seed Vermont beat number 3 seed Boston College 3-1. That one really felt like it was a close game. It was a 1-0 game until Ona Havana scores with, I think, 11 seconds left to go in the second period to make it a 2-0 game. And that, gives Vermont a little bit of room, a little bit of separation there to go into the third period. And it's enough to get a road win as they moved on to the what round are we in? Everyone's in semifinals. Everyone's in semifinals. You're right. Move on to the semifinals there this week. So the other series or the other games, Hockey East just played single games. Northeastern beating BU in double overtime 2-1. UConn beating Maine 6-1, and Holy Cross beating New Hampshire 5-4. What are your takeaways from what you saw in Hockey East this week?
Well, I think if you'd have told me at the beginning of the year the Final Four teams were UConn, Northeastern, Holy Cross, and Vermont, I mean, I would have never put money on that. Maybe UConn is the only one, right? Like nobody was sure what Northeastern was doing. So I think, sort of no matter what happens from this point, like those are huge milestones for Vermont and Holy Cross. Holy Cross has sort of quietly had just a spectacular season for them. And I'm not sure it will go past this round, but I just think for them, there's so much to build on from this. And it's just really, it's always good to see a team that, hadn't been in this position really start to push back and find their way. And they're, a program that I think is sort of reset a few years ago and trying to figure things out. I'm impressed by Vermont. I was impressed with sort of the not just the offensive push, which we've sort of known they've had. I think their a couple of players that came back from the Olympics are very helpful, but I think Una Havana's had a couple of really great goals in the past couple of weeks. And I'm not sure what to think. It'll be interesting. There were 2 very close games and 2 very much not close games in those Hockey East quarterfinals. And so I'm unsure to think about like what comes next, I didn't expect quite such a big blowout in those other 2 games, and I didn't necessarily expect double overtime or obviously Vermont taking the win there. So I'm no closer to figuring out Hockey East, I suppose, but I do think that it could be very interesting with Vermont playing with nothing to lose, and sort of riding that high and the momentum and the confidence. But they're playing a really balanced game for them right now, and I think that will be an interesting matchup. Especially if they can maybe get an early one on Lisa Janssen.
The Northeastern has home ice through the tournament as the top seed, but of course they don't have home ice, right? Quote unquote home ice. So they actually had to beat BU at BU's Walter Brown Arena last Saturday.
While being the home team.
While being the home team. And again, they're coming back to Walter Brown to play Vermont this week. So again, it's a unusual situation.
What do you think about locker rooms in that?
I don't know. I did not see anything about that, but I
didn't either, but that's interesting.
BU's got a room there. They might as well just let them use it. I hope anyone's not going to play those kind of games of like, oh no, we get your room sort of thing. But or that the league maybe stepped in and said, look,
it's just like as the higher seed, do they it wouldn't necessarily be their choice.
I have heard of those kind of shenanigans happening in the past. Of look, sure, we're the higher seed. We get your bench, because it's next to the penalty box or whatever like that. But
I didn't think to check that. So interesting.
Okay, so
I mean, it was just a fun weekend. Like, when was the last time do you think we had 5 Sunday games? Because it feels like maybe it's
yeah,
recency bias, but usually we get 1, maybe 2, 3 game series.
it feels
And
like
the
there's
fact that we had
been
5.
one in the WCHA every couple of years. And I feel like there's an ECAC game in there. But yeah, five seemed like a lot for a Sunday, and it was, it stretched them out throughout most of the day too, so that was interesting to
Big
follow
fan.
throughout. Yeah. Okay, let's turn to ECAC, where the top 4 teams all advanced: Yale, Princeton, Quinnipiac, and Cornell. Princeton did need 3 games, however, as did Quinnipiac. 2 of those game 3s on Sunday were in the ECAC. Princeton winning that game 3 5-1 after dropping game 2. It was, against Harvard. Ainsley Tuffy's gonna come with something, and she sure did. 41 saves in a 3-1 win in game 2 on Saturday. But the Tigers opened up a big lead in the Sunday game and took the series. Quinnipiac, did not follow the first couple of games stats wise. Saw the scores. Won 6-3 in game 1, lost 3-2 in overtime in game 2. Margot Norhad with the goal in that one. And then game 3 got wild. 5-4 is how it ended for Quinnipiac, but they were up 5-2 before Brown scored
like
2 with extra
not that
attackers.
much left. Yeah.
And had, I think, extra attackers for the last 2 with a 1 goal deficit, 2 minutes and change. I don't remember the exact number, but man, that went down to the wire. Kaylin Marsh, unstoppable, 7 goals.
7 goals in that series.
Hat trick in game 3 to get the 43 for the season. Really, really impressive. And Quinnipiac needed it. I mean, they're in a situation where nothing's guaranteed yet. So they absolutely needed to get through that series to have some breathing room.
Kaylin Marsh, you said it's 43, right?
That's
the next highest goal scorer team has 15. The third highest goal scorer has 5. Like, holy carrying the Bobcats, Kaylin LaMarche. And again, Kaylin LaMarche only had this one I definitely don't know, but it was in the teens. She had 11 goals as a freshman, 14 as a sophomore, and has 43 this year. Just absolute bananas. Don't know how to wrap my head around how to even talk about what Kaylin LaMarche is doing. Because, we've talked about this with someone like Abby Murphy, things like that, but everybody knows what she's doing and nobody's stopping her. Absolutely crazy. And that's not to take away from the other Bobcats. I don't want to say she's doing it single-handedly, but also she's got triple the goals of anybody else on her team and 9 times the third highest scorer on her team. So, yeah. Also, Felicia Frank's playing really well in net for them. I think there have been some other really big goaltenders that we've talked about quite a bit, or, maybe came out of nowhere for us, like Ainsley Tuffy. But Felicia Frank deserves some of that conversation as well. I just think she's sort of quietly been this really solid backstop for them. Somebody that I was impressed with when she was in U18s, and it's cool to see her sort of settle in and really give them that defensive background so that a player like Kaylin can do what she's doing. But yes, 7 goals, 43 for the year. So many more than everybody else. It's nuts. And the fact that no defense has really figured out how to slow her down is kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's a matchup nightmare for any team in the NCAA tournament then. If, the Bobcats, make sure to get there. That's oof. That's someone you don't want to have to game plan around, because, you can say, let's shut her down, but everyone's tried to do that. So obviously hasn't
and it's not like there aren't other talented players. If you overload her, you can't, it's not like the rest of the team can't also do things. So yeah, I would be interested to see her against some of these teams that are really pride themselves on being so stalwart in defense, but I definitely think it would test them. Just from a cross conference sort of a study of things, I would love to see it. I hope they figure it out and get themselves to the NCAA tournament.
Yep. Over in Atlantic hockey, both series in the semifinals went chalk. Penn State sweeping Syracuse 7-0 and 2-1. So again, like we saw with Wisconsin and Bemidji State, a really lopsided game and then a really close game. Abby Stonehouse scored the go-ahead goal for Penn State with the minute 11 left in the second period, and they were able to hold on there. Mercyhurst sweeping Lindenwood 2-1 and 3-2 in double overtime, so a couple of close games there too. Berlin Laliker scored in double overtime after Lindenwood led 2-0 in that game. Had a really good push, and then the Lakers clawed their way back into it to move into the championship game on Saturday at Penn State. Your thoughts on what happened this last weekend in Atlantic hockey?
We've talked about this a lot. These like 2-game series where one is a blowout and one is eked by, and I still don't understand it. I'm really excited for Lindenwood. I mean, it probably doesn't feel like it right now, but like that was a huge step for them to be in the semifinals and then to be in those games, to really like honestly let that one slip away. Like they haven't been the team that is the most competitive in that conference for a while. And it's been a shame. So I really hope that was a sign of what to expect from them and what we can see going forward. And I hope that they can really build on that and grow from there. Because it's been a while. It's a team that I just would have assumed wasn't gonna be a big player in the postseason. So based on sort of past results, right? So I think Mercyhurst probably has some work to do. It's one of those things where we've been talking about like what could happen with NPI, and like one of the big things is if Mercyhurst can beat Penn State, and like based on the trouble Mercyhurst had this weekend and also how darn good Penn State's been, I don't know how plausible it is to think about that happening. That's for sure.
It was like a long shot, but you never know. In NEWHA, the top 4 seeds all advanced there. Franklin Pierce, Assumption, St. Anselm, Stonehill. Assumption, the 2 seed, needed 3 games to get past post. Won 2-1 in game 1 in overtime. Jody Gratton with the overtime goal there, then lost game 2 to post 2-1 as well, before taking game 3 4-2. Again, that one got a little wild too. Assumption ran out to a 3-0 lead, and post cut it to 3-2, but Assumption able to move on with that one. I thought there may have been some upsets in NEWHA last weekend. It turned out no, it was the top 4 that move on.
I think it's fascinating that it's second to last place 10-win post that was the team that was the closest to pulling it off.
Mhm.
Like that it would have been. I expect craziness from that tournament, which is fun. But yeah, I did, based on how up and down the last couple weeks of that regular season, and the fact that there's like less than 10 points separating, first from fifth in that in their final standings. I did expect maybe a bit more there, but I mean, good for the top teams to step up. I mean, that's what you have to do at this time of year. So that will continue to be interesting to see how the rest of that, because those top 4 teams have beat each other up a ton, and I think you could roll a dice and get better odds on who's going to win than if you tried to pick it based on anything else.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, still to come in today's episode, we're going to talk about the championship week, leading into Saturday's championship games and then Sunday's selection show. And we'll also talk about some of the NPI possibilities and what is locked in, what is still to play for in these last, well, as of the time we're recording, is 13 games left to play in the conference tournaments. Yeah, it is crazy. We're down to 13 games, and then we're down to 10 games after that in the NCAA, so it's really coming down to it now. Okay, we'll take a quick break. Stay with us. We will be back on the PodKaz. Welcome back to the PodKaz. I'm Todd. Nicole is here along with me as usual. Let's talk about this week that we've got coming up with us. I really like this format. We've got one league playing semifinals each of these following 4 days: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, leading into the Saturday championship games. I think if you are just kind of interested in watching good, competitive, high stakes hockey, you're going to find a lot of it over these next few days. Starting Tuesday night, Hockey East, number 6 Vermont at number 1 Northeastern, number 4 Holy Cross at number 2 UConn. Both those games happening 6:00 Eastern. I am interested in, after BU pushed Northeastern into double overtime, to see whether Vermont can kind of follow a little bit of the same formula. And Lacey Janssen, I think, made 39 saves in that game. So BU got their chances. Can Vermont do the same? That's what it's going to come down to for me.
Well, they played 3 games this season, and Vermont lost 2 of them by a goal, 1 of them in overtime. So, it's not like it would be coming out of nowhere. So there's that. I think it's just like always looking back and seeing what they were able to do this season, is sort of the first place I check. And so that, plus the fact that I think Vermont's just been playing much better hockey these past couple weeks. They've done a really good job of peaking at the right time. It helps, they getting the Julian Mespred back from the Olympics and having that experience. And it's so funny. You're right that it's really great that all the games are spread out, but then these 2 are scheduled at the exact same
At
time.
the same time. Yeah.
I was gonna praise, because a bunch of the games this weekend were at the same time. So like, not only can you not watch them, but then they're all at the intermission at the same time, which is so dumb.
Let's hope the ESPN Plus has the multicast or whatever. You can put those 2 games side by side. That'd be nice. So if anyone out there is listening and can do that, help us out.
Yeah, this is gonna be, I think, a game of sort of which stars sort of pick up the mantle and sort of carry their team in that way. I think you've got some good goaltending, you've got some good goal scorers. There's a lot on the line. I think Vermont having nothing to lose is just like, I never discount that. Like, they are in a spot they never probably thought for real could be in, and so now they have this chance to pull off something big. And I think they have the confidence of where they are, but also the confidence of having played Northeastern close the rest of the season. And so I think it's a ripe for an upset. I feel like I think Vermont's in a good position leading into that. But like you said, I think the most important part is that, like, Lisa Janssen looked fallible, for lack of a better word. And I do think obviously she's still strong, but like you said, there were chances to be had, and I think that's the most important part.
Yeah, UConn looked really strong in beating Maine 6-1 on Saturday, and so they'll take that into playing at home against Holy Cross, which was able to squeak out a 5-4 win against New Hampshire. Even though New Hampshire made another run, they scored 2 goals into an empty net, or with an extra attacker, with an empty net behind them, to make that a little closer than it appeared before. So love the vibes there from Holy Cross in letting that get close at the end, and was a little bit more convinced by the way UConn took care of business. So I feel like that's, for me, a pretty good look at the way these 2 teams come into that one.
Yeah, agreed. I think, if we're talking about Vermont peaking at the right time, I feel like that was Holy Cross maybe not in the same sort of positive place. I will say, when they played, I mean, they last played in late November, and UConn took 2 1-goal wins, so it was 4-3 and 3-2. And again, I think getting goals on the really good goaltending at UConn is always a sign of, like, there's a chance there's a possibility. They weren't they forced UConn to score themselves and really play a tighter game than I think they have in obviously, like, last week at all. So Holy Cross has to be hitting on all their cylinders. They're a team that I think really outperformed what I expected from them this year, and so it makes it harder to sort of predict what they could do in a situation like this. But I feel like, as you said, like, based on vibes from last weekend, I think this is UConn's game to lose.
Yeah. Wednesday is for the NEWHA, which has 2 games at different times. 3:00 Eastern, Assumption hosting St. Anselm, 7 Eastern, Franklin Pierce hosting Stonehill. So if you are looking to watch both of those, there's your opportunity. They're separated by a couple hours, so you get a chance there. I'm given the way that we saw, the fluctuation of the standings throughout the second half of the season, I don't know that you can really put anyone in as the favorite other than Franklin Pierce and Assumption. Hosting games maybe gets them a little bit of an advantage.
Yeah, right. I mean, if I think other conferences are a toss-up, I don't even know what the terminology is here. I have nothing smart to say about what I think could happen.
Just pick up and move on, right?
Games. Throw a dart. Yeah, I mean, I think Franklin Pierce is a team that has also sort of been playing some of their best hockey, except for that very last game of the season where they took that big loss, but they were on a winning streak heading into that, and you took care of business with St. Michael's, sort of no problem, as they should. But yeah, I think Franklin Pierce suffers a little bit from maybe some inexperience in terms of being the front running team and being in this position and being the team that people are gunning for. And so I think it's maybe a little bit of sort of how they handle themselves this week. And again, that little bit of short turnaround going from Saturday to Wednesday when you're used to having a whole week. There's just a lot of variables here that doesn't even take in the chaos that we saw all season long. So yeah, that's what I've got. I think these games will be interesting if you've got a chance to watch during the day on Wednesday. I highly recommend it. And then obviously Wednesday night with the Stonehill Franklin Pierce. But yeah, I don't have any idea what's going to happen, and that's what makes it fun.
Yes, exactly. Thursday is the start of the WCHA Final Face-Off in St. Paul. The Lee and Penny Anderson Arena, first-year venue at St. Thomas, is hosting that event. We will see if that becomes a fixture or if this is a one-year thing and we're into somewhere else next season. But Minnesota State, fresh off that upset of Minnesota Duluth, plays Wisconsin at 4 Central, followed by Minnesota against Ohio State, 7:30 Central. I don't remember the actual numbers in my head on Minnesota State, Wisconsin, but it's something like Minnesota State has won 3 out of 119 games ever played against Wisconsin.
Congratulations on your upset.
But
Here's your present.
One of those was in the WCHA playoffs, a game 2 at LeBon, 2014-ish range, somewhere in that era. So it's happened before. It's a tall ask, but you can't rule anything out. I think Wisconsin did get a bit of a wake-up call on Saturday against Bemidji State, though, when they're not at top level, they open the door for anyone to come in and be right there with them and maybe sneak out a goal off of a couple of Wisconsin bodies that ties the game, and then who knows, going into overtime. So I'm interested to see if that provides a little bit of incentive for Wisconsin to be on its game right off the opening face-off on Thursday.
Yeah, I think a couple things have to. Well, I think that Minnesota State will probably attempt to do pretty much what they did in Minnesota Duluth. The difference is the scoring ability between the two opponents, right? Mm-hmm. And I think so. Obviously, they have to have a huge goaltending performance again, and poor Haley Hansen. It's just gonna face 300 shots in 6 days or something like that. I think that what Minnesota State has to figure out is that balance of, if they do that forecheck, will they just get beat in transition? I just think it's a much bigger problem when you're playing Wisconsin. And I think I agree. Wisconsin has done this on and off all season, where it's like that. I don't think it's lazy. I think it's a they've been at the top and things come so easy that I think there's just maybe a lack of focus where they kind of forget to do all the details and do all the things, and they're so good at if you beat if you steal the puck from KK Harvey, you beat her. She's tracking you down in a couple of strides. And so I think this idea that they can fix their mistakes makes them sometimes a little too lax in the focus and the details. One would have thought the playoffs would have been enough to rid them of that mindset, but maybe Saturday's game did it as well. I'm sure Mark Johnson had some thoughts about that for them afterwards. But yeah, I think it's just if Wisconsin is being smart with the puck, if they are not trying to be too cute, if they are not forgetting sort of the basic stuff, then they're a really tough team to beat. The problem for them is they've shown that they forget how to do that, or they don't do that. And it's not just it's been a good handful of games this season. And so I don't know, what it takes to get the right mindset at this point of the season. It's a little, to me, that was the more concerning part, was that like they weren't already sort of locked in, and maybe it was the relief of the kids that had put in so much extra time with the Olympians gone, and they were able to, take a deep breath and not play quite as much and as hard as they had. And maybe it's the transition back for the Olympians. But I definitely think it's been one of those things where everyone, I'm sure you're getting this too, but here in Wisconsin, people are asking me like, oh, is this the best Wisconsin team ever? And is it inevitable? And I'm like, I don't know. Just no. First of all, the best team ever, I don't know how you quantify that, because the game has changed so darn much. But the inevitable part, I'm like, I don't like that. If it comes to Wisconsin and Ohio State, and it's coin flip, just like the gold medal game was. And particularly, like, I just haven't seen the same mental mistakes from Ohio State as Wisconsin has had. So, yeah, that was a whole tangent, but it will be interesting to see not only if Minnesota State can do what they did, but I think the problem that comes is doing it for a full 60 minutes or more, if necessary, particularly with sort of the transition and pace that Wisconsin likes to play with. It's one thing to sort of assert your will early on and to do it well, but it's just being able to maintain that level, especially after they just played the 3 games and the adrenaline and the push of having beaten Minnesota. It's certainly, for many reasons, an uphill battle for the Mavericks.
We haven't even talked about Ohio State and Minnesota yet. That's the other one that could be really, really good there. The Buckeyes swept the Gophers in Columbus not too long ago, but it was when Olympians were away from both teams. So that changes some of the dynamic in that game. We also have Minnesota having had to play, like we said, 3 games in the first round versus Ohio State getting out with a sweep. It's last year, Minnesota came back and won this game, this 2-3 semifinal game up in Duluth. And I would imagine that the Buckeyes get reminded of that a few times this week.
I feel like most of the season has been driven by the national championship loss, but
right.
Well, look, we could also yell at you about this one. Not yell at you, but just
use whatever you have to, right?
Turn that screw a little bit more. Yeah, I think what will be interesting to me in this is if everybody can keep their cool. It was not bad in that last series, but again, the sort of the bigger names were gone. But that series at Ritter earlier in the season is the one that had the post-game fight. So, and now there's just so much more riding on it on the line. We will get into this with the NPI, but Minnesota, with that loss to St. Cloud State and some other stuff, they're like not in the position they'd like to be going into, where they will be fitting into that NCAA bracket. And I guess you've played with it more, so I don't know if they can change that at all. But 4 versus 5, well, 3 versus 4 versus 5 are very different positions to be in this weird 11-team bracket. So Minnesota is gonna want to do as much as they can to control that destiny. So yeah, I think even sort of taking aside, I just think who can control the special teams and not getting baited into some of this stuff and not just giving up power plays and things like that is just, I think, really going to be important in that game. I thought overall Ohio State is the team that weathered their Olympians being gone the best. I felt they had very little bump in the road transition. And so I think they put themselves in the best position sort of now that they've got them back. And I will say that there is something to the fact that they didn't get super tested, right? Like they cruised through those 2 games, whereas Minnesota really had to work and adjust. And there could be something to that, putting them in a better position for these one and done games in the semifinals and possibly the finals.
Yeah. Okay. ECAC is the last of the semifinals on Friday in Lake Placid. Yale, the top seed, playing 4th seed Cornell at 4 Eastern, 2 seed Princeton playing Quinnipiac, the 3 seed at 7 Eastern. That seems ambitious to have games scheduled 3 hours apart. I feel like that never actually works out. So give it a little bit more time if you're paying attention to that one. Cornell is the one team that has to win the tournament to continue its season into the NCAA tournament. The other 3 are not guaranteed of being in yet, but can be given some results going their way this weekend. So
yes, Cornell is in if they win and out if they don't. Like correct. There are no other scenarios that put them in. Yeah.
So, I mean, it feels like there's so much to play for, given that nobody is out and nobody is in. Like you don't know for sure you're going to be playing next week if you lose your first game on Friday. A lot building into those games this week.
Yeah, and I feel like I still don't have a super great read on like what kind of team or like what to expect from Yale. They had such a strong second half, but like early on were some losses that you wouldn't have expected, and so it's like I don't know that I like have a good take on like what we're going to see from them and what they can do against Cornell's sort of defense and goaltending. Yeah, there's so much riding on these games for everyone. Like you said, some of it is about being in the tournament. It's still about seeding as well. And so when there is so much for it to play for, I feel like that just adds so much more variables to the situation.
Yeah. It should be fun seeing that in Lake Placid as well, getting everyone in one location for the in a one neutral site location as opposed to a home site. We'll see how that goes in terms of attendance, I guess.
Yeah, it does, it does take away like a home ice advantage for Yale as well. I did look, they split with Cornell 2 games this season, so definitely nothing to take away from there that can help us figure out what happened. And Quinnipiac and Princeton also split. Quinnipiac lost both games to Princeton, 3-4 in overtime and 2-0 Princeton won. So yeah, I think Princeton has a little more scoring depth and a little more that they can do sort of up and down the lineup. What Galen Marsh has been doing has been the focus, but Izzy Wonder is just spectacular with the puck. Mackenzie Alexander is probably the most untalked about or underrated scorer across the country. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting game. I feel like goaltending could be a really huge part of that one. And yeah, the others, I feel like I don't know what's going to happen because chaos and nothing, like there wasn't any. But in this one, I'm just like, but I think they're really close games. And that's why I'm unsure who's going to pull it off. But that should make it fun.
Yeah, that's what I'm expecting.
My big line.
Yep. Then we get into Saturday, which we know one of the championship games already. That's Atlantic Hockey. It's Mercyhurst at Penn State. That's 2:00 Eastern. That'll be the first one on the ice, unless the NEWHA game gets scheduled before that. We don't know a time there yet because I believe it has to do with who's hosting it. So Mercyhurst, Penn State. We talked a little bit about this before. It feels like a real heavy lift for Mercyhurst to go in to Pagula and get a win, but I don't necessarily love the way the last few weeks of the season have gone for Penn State. Now, I guess you can go into that. Look, they had this wrapped up how many weeks ago? 5 weeks early, 4 weeks to go in the regular season, something like that. But they've put themselves in a position where every game they play the rest of the way is at Pagula. This game in the championship, regional game, Frozen Four, all there. So I feel like at some point there's going to be that to draw on. There's going to be the look, maybe the last few weeks it's there's been a few games that maybe should have been closer than they should have been. But time to dial it up and time to be present and commit to doing what you think you can do to put this team where they think it should be.
I mean, I think Penn State has had this circled on the calendar probably for years, like maybe since the last time they have hosted the national championship. Like this can and should be us, and so like you said, this is what they've been working for. This is what they have wanted. They are in this spectacular position to sort of be in the driver's seat as the hosts, even not as the top seed. And so it's time to sort of put their money where their mouth is. I think there probably is something to coasting through those last couple weeks after wrapping up the championship so early. But I think, the thing that Penn State has always had to overcome is that they just don't play as tough of a schedule. Like the difference between them and the rest of their conference is so different. And so I'm kind of like coasting isn't going to prepare you for what you're about to face. And they haven't done so well in the NCAA tournament when facing, teams from other conferences. They are ranked higher. They did do even better this year. But I do think Penn State is a little in the prove it part of their program journey, right? So I think they have to, not just win this conference tournament, but maybe do it a little decisively and really sort of play to their strength and really show that this is a team that is in conversation to be playing for a national championship in a couple weeks.
Yep. The rest of Saturday is WCHA championship at 2:00 Central, Hockey East 3:30, ECAC at 5 Eastern, and then the NEWHA, again, TBD on the timing on that one. Then the selection show happens 10:30 Central on ESPNU on Sunday morning. So make sure you're up for that. We will have all that covered on USCHO.com. And it's going to be fun these next 5 days here of hockey watching and experiencing and everything. But I'm just kind of hoping there's a magical moment out there. I mean, it happens when champions are won, but when it's done in dramatic fashion, it feels like it's even more. And so I'm hoping we get a few of those throughout the week, and that'll just kind of make it a little bit more special.
Yeah, I think the audience is there and primed to be pulled in. I mean, I sort of made a much more secure transfer to Blue Sky with the Olympics. Sports seemed to finally make that transfer. And so I'm using X because that's still where all the teams are putting their videos. But I reposted and brought the game winner from Layla and a few other goals over to Blue Sky. And that post got a ton of play. The audience is there and sort of thirsting to see more of these players post Olympics. And so it sucks that it's going to take another sort of big play, big game, a national championship like we had last year, which seems impossible. But yeah, I think there's a window and some opportunity here. Unfortunately, all these games are on paid streaming, and so it does have to be something that gets shared and maybe breaks containment. Because if you want to watch a bunch of these games, you have to pay for BTN and ESPN Plus and Flow Hockey and so. And BTN changed too. I don't even think you can get just for the month. You have to still pick a school and stuff. So, I hope that, I hope that people get to watch. I hope that some of it breaks containment, and we'll do our best to keep sharing some of those highlights and getting them out there. But was it a good goal from Layla? Yeah. Was it anything super spectacular? No. And the reaction it got was that it was way better than how it actually played out, which is no offense to her. People are looking for these to be able to watch these players. And so I think we're just in a chance that I hope, like you said, some of these games really sort of reach outside that and
Right.
show off what the best of what this sport has to give.
The WCHA games are on over-the-air TV in the Twin Cities and in Madison. I know those for sure. Those aren't necessarily the markets you need to hit. However, those are already pretty good. But and the Hockey East Championship game is on. I can't remember if it's ESPNU or ESPN News. One of those platforms.
Oh, it's one of them.
So those are basic cable, I guess, opportunities. And a basic cable opportunity for the Hockey East Championship game. So it's not everything being covered, but it's something. So if you're able to watch, it's a good chance to take a glance. Okay, one more break, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about some of those NPI permutations that I spent way too much time looking at a spreadsheet on earlier today. So stay with us. Oh, man, it is, but I had to kind of cut myself off at some point. It was too much. All right, stay with us on the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast. Todd and Nicole here to wrap things up with a look at the NPI, and make sure you check out the NPI predictor on USCHO.com. You can find it off the main women's hockey page, and also we'll link it in the show notes here. There are.
We will also drop a link for what the NPI is and how it's calculated, especially if you're new around here or if you're not a mathy person like neither of us. We'll drop a link to something I wrote about that recently when we changed over to the NPI, just in case you're like, what are we talking about? It's just the percentage index. It's the math that the committee uses to rank the teams based on what they did all season. So sorry for interrupting, Todd. I just want to, if we got newbies.
Right. What we had talked about in years past being the pairwise has been replaced by the NPI in full this season. So that's the only thing that's being used to select these teams. If you are a fan of Minnesota Duluth, you probably need to get the candles out or the thought circle or whatever you need to do. Yes, because the Bulldogs have put themselves in a situation that is not great. However, it doesn't require to get them in the tournament. Doesn't require all sorts of upsets or things like that. They need the opposite. They need teams that are favored to win their games in the conference tournament this week. So if teams that are already in the top 9 of the NPI ahead of Duluth win the 4 non-NEWHA championships, the Atlantic Hockey, the ECAC, Hockey East, WCHA, Duluth will get in. So there's that to hold on to. The numbers don't look great because there's so many other possibilities out there. It's just for Duluth, I felt like, they had turned a corner beating Minnesota a couple times, and then it didn't go in the best of 3 first round series. There's so much hoping that the Bulldogs have to do to try and get in this week.
I just imagine with Etsy witches and summoning circles and all the fun stuff that could imagine happening here. Yeah, it's interesting, particularly because of the chaos we've talked about so much, that in the end it's please everybody do what you're supposed to, which for the most part, we talked about some upsets and some chaos, but then the top 4 seeds went through, and so I think there is a lot to hold on to there for Bulldog fans. But yeah, definitely did not do themselves any favors.
So as it stands, and this is before Tuesday's start of the conference tournament championship week, there are 19 teams that are still having hopes. Either they're in or they have hopes of being in the 11-team tournament. 6 of them have clinched. And this is courtesy of an analysis done by our publisher, Tim Bruley, who ran through all 192 permutations there are with 13 remaining games. Sent me a spreadsheet. It very helpfully summarized it, but let me go into some of these crazier scenarios. So the 6 teams that are in that we know of are Wisconsin, Ohio State, Penn State, Minnesota, Northeastern, and UConn. There are 9 teams that have to win their tournament championship to get in. So all of NEWHA, that's, Franklin Pierce, Assumption, St. Anselm, Stonehill. Mercyhurst has to win to get in. Minnesota State and the WCHA has to get in. Cornell and ECAC Hockey, and Vermont and Holy Cross in Hockey East. Those are the teams that have to win the auto bid to get in the tournament. So that leaves Yale, Princeton, Quinnipiac as teams that could either get in as an at-large team or as a auto bid for winning the championship. Quinnipiac is in pretty good shape. I believe it's 95% of scenarios gets the Bobcats in. Yale is pretty good. Princeton is still above 50%, but those are not the numbers you love to see when they're not 100%. And if you lose that first game on Friday in the ECAC, you're sweating through another day's games.
Yeah, and just like for people, like the MPI is a like sort of it's a long calculation, and so it's not just like it's how the other teams, it's the teams that you faced as well, and then how they played each other. I'm not saying this well, but the point is that like your loss, it's not the only thing that affects, right? So like it's how other teams are doing, and then that gets rolled into this long calculation as well. And so like, for someone for you like UMD, it's like them sitting and waiting and watching these numbers flux based on every game that finishes. And you were saying like for someone like Princeton, it's like how Stonehill does could affect
Right.
UMD because they played in the, like, that's where how like finite some of this gets, because
Yes.
it's this sort of perpetual calculation of your team's strength of schedule and how you played it. It gets overly complicated, but the point that I wanted to make clear was just that it's this sort of ongoing forever calculation, and one little change in that permutates out to a lot of different things.
Yeah. It really does get into the like insanity level when you're thinking of, okay, there's this one scenario we talked about where Duluth gets in if all of the higher seeds win, but there's one where Duluth can get in if Mercyhurst beats Penn State for the Atlantic hockey title, but then also Quinnipiac has to win ECAC, Northeastern or UConn wins Hockey East, anyone but Stonehill wins NEWHA, and Wisconsin has to beat Ohio State in the WCHA final. And some other things that I can't figure out have to happen that get Duluth in. And that is because, like you were just talking about, those numbers of the NPI get so close between Duluth and Princeton that it flips back and forth based on some of those results involving teams that played other teams, and it all goes into this calculation. Like Stonehill, it's not even necessarily that Stonehill has to lose its first game. It can get to the championship, it just can't win the championship. So it's really convoluted, and I can't figure it out. That's what I had to just give up on and say, nope, I'm done here. I know these numbers, but I can't figure it out. So it's a lot more.
Also got sent that spreadsheet, and at no point I didn't even open it because I knew it would just like literal Greek to me, and like So I was like, here's what I wrote up. Does it make sense? And I'm like, well, those words work for me. Yes. But yeah, like we've got 2 types of people, and it's me and Todd. Todd loves the spreadsheet and all of that. It would have just made my eyes glaze. So I appreciate that you put in the work on that. Because
I'll credit to Tim for running all that. And those are the same things you can run with the NPI predictor on our site. So it pulls up the same kind of results. In terms of seeding, Wisconsin and Ohio State, we've talked about this for a while. They're clearly the 1 and 2. That's locked in. Wisconsin has to win the WCHA title to get the number 1 seed. Otherwise, Ohio State will be the 1, which is not necessarily what I thought would happen. Say if Wisconsin won its semifinal, Minnesota beat Ohio State, and then Minnesota beat Wisconsin, Ohio State still moves ahead of Wisconsin in the calculation. It's a very small number, but
again, it's this weird. Yeah.
It's a we have to wait and see what happens on that. But that's how that goes with those two teams. Penn State is locked in as the number 3 overall seed, so they will get a regional where they're bringing in 2 other teams to State College next week. And then Minnesota and Northeastern are locked into the 4 and 5, but we don't know the order yet. It is about 21% of the scenarios Northeastern passes the Gophers. And the thing that surprised me was even if the Gophers win the WCHA title, there are scenarios where Northeastern winning the Hockey East title still passes the Gophers for 4th and flips who hosts that regional final next week. So a lot of these things we just have to let them play out and see what happens. I like knowing ahead of time what the possibilities are, but I do think you can also go drive yourself crazy trying to figure out every opportunity or every option here.
It's crazy that Minnesota spent most of this year as the number 3 team, and basically the last 2-3 weeks, those results turned them into a team that could have to go on the road and no longer host.
Right.
And not just go on the road, but really go on the road and head to Boston. Sorry, my dog is nipping at me because we're late to feed him. It tickled. That's why I was laughing. I apologize. Just completely changes the course of their tournament and the caliber of who they have to play and the travel and all of it. Just kind of nuts. I think that I think we're still learning MPI and how much can change over the course of one game. And I feel like this season we learned how volatile and how much things can move. Not just with your own loss, but with what can happen from other games. And so I think that's a fascinating lesson to learn about sort of needing to play everything out and really take care of business. But yeah, it's a huge swing for a huge difference for Minnesota based on really a couple of close games and those 2 overtime losses to Minnesota Duluth. So just kind of crazy. And we should add to just something that we have talked, because we've talked to the selection committee. There sort of is, this isn't like basketball, or there isn't really a conversation about who gets in. The NCAA, committee head has told us that the 11 teams, the at-large bids go straight from the MPI. And that's why we talk so much about this MPI number and sort of the permutations and the things that can come from it, because ultimately the final bracket comes from those teams that are ranked. Now, if there are upsets and some teams get auto bids, it's not necessarily the top 11 teams, right? It's not the 11 teams at the top of MPI, but the number 9 team doesn't get in over the number 17. The number 17 would take that priority. So they are going to fill in the auto bids that come from the conference tournament winners, and then the rest of the at-large bids will go in order down the NPI ranking. And so that's why there is so much conversation in this for us, and sort of making sure you all understand the calculations and the way that really hundredths of a point could come into play here, and be the difference between in or out, hosting or not, playing one of the opening round games or not. All of that can come down to not just your outcome, but many other games' outcomes as well.
And then if you're a team that just misses out on hosting, or you start to think, well, that tie that we were ahead in the last minute, oh man, that doesn't feel great. And so the 2020 vision, that gets awful at that point. Having seen a few of those teams that are just oh man, we just lost out by that much. That's a rough one. So that's why every game matters. That's why and it goes all the way back to the first games in September. They all count towards this, and so everything is going to get considered toward the end here. So
why we nitpick all of this, because it does.
Yeah,
it's why we're ranking on somebody in October about a missed opportunity, because it can come back to bite you.
It does. It will.
And
it has. Yes. Okay. A lot of fun coming up this week. We hope you enjoy it. When we talk to you next week, we will have that 11-team bracket. We will be able to look back on these championship games, and we'll be a week away from the Frozen Four, believe it or not. So it's getting crazy. It's getting right down there. We thank you for joining us. We will talk to you again next week on the podcast.